Listen up, Gotham.
Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Hi, Buttons, it's me, Harley Quinn.
This is Batman.
This is Robin.
Tune into the Bat Fanatic podcast.
The Bat Fan Addict Podcast.
The Bat Fanatic Podcast.
The Bat Fanatic Podcast with Sammy Warmhands.
With Sammy Warmhands.
The Bat Fan Addict Podcast. Bat Fan Addict Podcast.
Although, Sam, you might think about changing the name.
Hey everybody, it's the Dark Knight of Rap, Sammy Warmhands, and this is the Bat Fanatic Podcast. As always, I'm joined by Dunk and Gramps, my co-hosts, and we'd like to shout out our sponsor and friend, the Nando Knight from TNK Comics and Collectibles. You can follow for his con schedule and claim sales on Instagram at the Nando Knight, K-N-I-G-H-T, by the way, as well as shortboxed.com/TNK Comics. Now, today, we're doing a DC classic film just in time, coincidentally, for the September release of Super/Man, the Christopher Reeve Story, a new documentary. That's right, we're going all the way back to the granddaddy of comic book films, Richard Donner's Superman.
Well, you're just not that funny.
Here's Master Bruce. He wants to join me today.
Hey, Bruce.
Hey, buddy.
Hey, Bruce, you want to meet Alfred? He's over there.
Look over there. Say hello.
Bruce was smacked the shit out of Alfred. Like, bro, where the hell's my treats? Whap, 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 whap. God. I worked from home and I watched Superman 2 more times.
I love this. You're like throwing yourself at these. You're like, yeah, I read the Riddler and then I watched the Batman 3 times. And then as soon as we were talking about this one, cool, man, I'm going to watch that 3 times before the show. I'm like, great.
I still got the fucking Riddler sitting right next to my desk. I'm like,
That's Dunk, man. It's like 1,000% or nothing.
Well, let's do a quick introduction. Gramps, say hi to the people.
Hey, guys and gals.
So enthusiastic. He's so happy to be here. Dave, what's good with you, man? How you doing?
oh, things are good, you know? Woke up today, so that's a good thing.
All right. So today we are jumping back into cinema. We used to do a regular every other comics and films. And I think we're going to spread it out a little bit more, but we still want to talk about some DC classics that we haven't got to. So we are going to do Superman, the movie from 1978. This was directed by Richard Donner, written by Mario Puzo, starring Christopher Reeve, Marlon Brando, who was top billed over Christopher Reeve, Gene Hackman, Margot Kidder, Ned Beatty, and so many others, with music composed by John Williams. Now, normally I look these things up, so if I left anybody out, I just did this from memory because fucking this is the stuff we grew up with, right? You guys grew up on this stuff the same, right?
Oh, yeah. My whole upbringing was debating whether I like Batman or Superman, but I grew up, I was born in the 80s.
Yeah.
So it was always a battle with Superman and Batman and every child that was raised in that era, I guess.
Wait, you said we were supposed to do Superman the movie 1970. I thought you said Shogun. I've been watching Shogun.
You're just trying to pull an Evan and carry on tradition. Like, oh, sorry, I watched the wrong thing.
Love you, Evan.
Yeah, I saw that guy today. I went down to his drum shop.
Oh, nice.
I was in the area doing a job interview. Yeah, always good to see that guy. So when I think back to watching this movie as a kid, I have a couple specific memories that come to mind. And one of which, of course, is my little Kenner Star Power action figure that was so beat the fuck up. Like, it was so played with that to this day I have it, and it was broken off at the knee repeatedly. And my stepdad kept gluing it back on, but it was at the joint. So eventually he put like a pin in it somehow and then glued that and fixed it. And then it broke again. And like the thing has been in and out of surgery for, the Man of Steel. And then the other thing I think about is, when you're a kid and in the 80s, you got your Super Mario pajamas and you're running around the house and boing and whatever. See, I had a Superman cape. And my aunt, who's always been kind of a crafty person, my Aunt Karen, made this awesome red Superman cape. And she used like felt paint in yellow and drew the logo and it had a little metal clasp just at the neck. And I thought that was the coolest fucking shit ever. I'd be running around the house, sticking your two fists up, pretending you're flying and shit. This movie just brings me back to childhood for sure. Do you guys have any memories about the time? Obviously.
Oh, definitely.
Dunk, you were little like me. I think, Gramps, you probably were a little bit older.
I was 28 when I first saw this movie.
Hasn't aged. He's a vampire.
Yes, it was very influential in my childhood, more so my brother's childhood, because he was older than me and he was probably about 5. He told his little friend that he could fly like Superman. And the guy was like, no, you can't. And he said, yes, I can. He literally climbed on the house. This is when houses had tall antennas for like your TV reception.
Yeah.
Climbed the antenna and jumped.
Oh my God.
Fell to the ground, snapped his leg in half.
Oh man.
Well, he flew for like a millisecond. It's called a jump.
Yeah. He said the kid just stood there and looked at him. I mean, my brother's got this femur sticking out of his leg.
Oh,
and
Jesus.
the kid just turned and ran. And he didn't feel it because he's such in shock. But when he got up, he's like, I couldn't get up.
Oh,
and
man.
so he spent, I don't know, months in the hospital.
Oh my God, man.
That's
crazy.
So from then on, I said, you're not Superman. You're Captain Gravity. So that's what I call my brother is Captain Gravity.
That's funny, man.
Yeah.
I actually have a really funny story about Superman. I said it once in the podcast.
On yours or ours?
On mine. When I was in kindergarten, I was 5 years old, and I wanted to be a Superman that year, which is weird because,
like for Halloween.
Yeah, for Halloween. For those people who follow me, I always post this picture of me when I'm 4. There's a picture next to my cake.
Mm-hmm.
It's a Batman on top of my cake with Batman balloons because I was 4, and when I was 4, that was 1990. I was heavily dedicated to Batman. But, after watching so many Superman movies, my dad was like, hey, how about if you be Superman for Halloween?
Yeah.
I went to school with no costume, and I had it in my backpack, right? Because similar to one of the scenes I'm sure we're going to talk about, I wanted to jump into the room and like get dressed and jump back out.
Yeah.
Were you wearing glasses?
Oh, no. I was just little Dave. I went to the bathroom and I jumped out, and I was like, opened the bathroom door, and I was like, dun, 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 dun. I jumped out. I was like, it's me, Superman. And my costume ripped.
Oh no.
Straight on the ass, like straight. And everyone saw like my Hanes Superman undies. Oh man, I was embarrassed. And that was the day when I was like, yep, I'm a Batman fan.
That was the day.
That was the day I was like, all right, I'm done with this nonsense.
You guys both have these formative memories that could have very well ruined the character for you. That's funny to me.
It's hysterical.
All right, so let's get into the story here. So the film opens in a very interesting way because, I mean, this is the granddaddy of comic book films. So it opens with a black and white movie theater screen. The film reel is playing of an Action Comics issue, which I couldn't find anywhere. I don't think it exists outside this film. Do you guys know?
Yeah, it kind of opens like those old-timey, what do they call them, serials?
Mm-hmm.
People would go to the movie theater, to see a movie, but also to get the news. So it kind of starts off like that. And obviously, Superman's famous for being the first, correct me if I'm wrong, but the first superhero in comic form. Because, I mean, they still had heroes in like newspaper strips, like the Phantom and some other people, but they weren't like superheroes in a comic book form. So that's why Superman is, like you said, the OG granddaddy.
Let's look at Action Comics. I just can't tell what Action Comics it is.
I think it was just something special made for...
Yeah, there's no issue number,
I looked up what comics is in the movie. I found a bunch of like side-by-side comparisons and stuff. I looked at, Superman comics from 1938. Couldn't find anything. So I think it was just
Movie
created
special.
for
Yeah,
the
makes
film.
sense.
But yeah, so we get the comic and flip through a couple pages, and a young kid is telling us about Superman's comic debut during the Great Depression, kind of setting the scene. And the last panel of this comic is the globe on the top of the Daily Planet building, and then it dissolves into a shot of the real Daily Planet set that we're going to see in the movie, and then we transition into the title sequence, which gives us that incredible theme song and all the names flying up there across the screen through space. You know, I used to think in modern terms of like the long-winded opening title sequence that so many superhero movies have, which like I think of the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films as being a good, more recent version. You could take it all the way back to this film, and so many tropes of comic book films can be taken all the way back to this.
But I love that, you know, opening sequence where it looks kind of like a laser and you hear
yeah, when you get the S logo.
Yeah, it's a modern day PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, think back.
so
I mean, back
dope.
in its
Like,
day, that was state of the art.
I legit sat on my couch on Sunday when I watched it the first time and I texted you guys.
Yeah,
I was just like, they should keep it this way.
I wonder if they've ever made like a 3D version of it.
I mean, it's kind of got a magical quality though, and it's impossible not to think of Star Wars, which is only a year and a half
of course.
earlier. You know, they're back to back.
Yeah.
It's got the John Williams score. You're transitioning from the title sequence into space and onto planet Krypton, and like, it's definitely got a lot of connective tissue there, and just the way that the film opens. But like, both of those movies give you such a feeling of wonder and like awe, like, oh, this is going to be something epic, you know?
Both of those films kind of have these iconic opening sequences, but also the iconic theme music.
Yeah, I can't believe that John Williams did both of those back to back. That's just insane.
Yeah.
Crushing it.
Everybody knows that Superman theme.
Yeah.
It's just ingrained in your brain. I mean, it's like burned in.
New song.
Let's all sing it and get a copyright flag. So the first scene here is a sentencing hearing for General Zod. And the last vote comes down to Jor-El, who repeatedly mispronounces Krypton as Krypton because Brando couldn't be bothered to give a shit, and he was too famous for anyone to correct him. And Jor-El makes it a unanimous decision to banish Zod and his gang to the Phantom Zone, basically an album cover floating in space. And I always love that image.
Whatever you mentioned, I'm going to fast forward to as I'm watching it in front of me.
Okay.
For the fourth time.
I also love the hula hoop prison they're in.
It's like, what happens if you cross it? I got so many questions occurred when I was watching this.
I mean, let's talk a little bit just about the design of Krypton and the costume design, the sets, the effects. There's so much going on here that, you know, I can't put myself back to that time because I wasn't alive yet. But like, even just as a young kid, having not seen a lot of movies, we believe we're on an alien planet right now. And
well, this was in a time in movies, and Star Wars is another good reference. They built these miniature sets, these model sets, and this movie has model sets throughout.
I think there's only one time where it's obvious in the dam scene.
Is this a goddamn?
But yeah, the rest of it's very convincing.
Very well done. It's easy to look back now as an adult and be like, okay, yeah, but when you're a kid, you believe you're there in outer space and on this foreign planet that looks like the North Pole.
Yeah.
It was very striking to see this is where Kal-El, Superman, came from versus, you know, Earth. And now you see why he has this fortress of solitude in the North Pole area, Arctic area, because that reminds him, or that's kind of how Krypton is, or Krypton, sorry.
Yeah. And so at the sentencing hearing, Zod actually offers Jor-El to join him and they can rule Krypton together.
He's still defiant to the end.
Yeah. And when he's turned down, he basically vows that, you know, someday you or your heirs will kneel before me.
That's some big brass balls to start out with a scene like that, because that's automatically saying there's going to be a sequel to this movie.
Yeah.
Well, it's crazy because you're assuming that this is going to be the main antagonist in the film, and he never comes back. That's pretty wild.
He's just flopping
Right.
on that album.
I thought that was pretty genius to start out that way.
Yeah.
We're just world building in this one, as
Yeah.
we should,
And speaking of a segue, the next scene feels a little abrupt. We get this big hearing, and there's all these, heads on screens or whatever. And then Zod floats off into space, into the Phantom Zone. And then immediately we're in like another hearing or something where Jor-El is like being accused of sedition and treason and insurrection, for telling them basically like, it's like the movie Don't Look Up now. It's like the asteroid is coming, guys. And, they're just
hey guys, we're not going to be here anymore. Like
the way that they even show it, they show this big red sun about to absorb the planet, and these guys are still like, nah, we're good.
Yep.
Let's go to the day-to-day.
And once they accuse him of all these things, he basically resigns to like, okay, well, I can't convince you, but I can save my son. And so he and his wife, who barely gets any speaking lines here, Bruce just fucking bit me, decide to take their child and build an escape pod. And it's filled with kryptonite crystals containing a wealth of knowledge about their civilization and the place that he's going to. And no sooner do they do this, but the ground starts breaking and shaking all around them, and the city falls to pieces. Baby Kal-El, I should say, ascends through the ceiling, bursts through the glass, off into space as his parents look on, surrounded by destruction. And then the special effects here, again, are pretty impressive, watching the people scramble around, falling off these cliffs and down these cracks, and the way the light interacts with their space suits.
Yeah, they look like Tron, kind of.
Yeah, very impressive to me how this is executed.
Yeah, they did a great job with like any scene where like things are being destructive. I was like, that's acting. It's not like, hey, we're going to move the whole set this way, guys. Everyone's like, all right.
Well, we talked about Godzilla -1 on one of the last episodes. They would have like this 25-foot section of ship that they built. And it's the same one that they use for every single ship in the movie. And it's just a stationary thing with green screen all around it. And so when they're at rough seas and Godzilla's coming out and the whole thing's tipping, that is achieved 100% by the camera movement and the actors throwing their bodies around.
Nice.
There is nothing. Like, it's fucking a completely stationary set. I couldn't believe it when I was watching that, because they'll show you the original shot and then the initial, VFX, and then the more developed one and then the final one, and it's really cool to watch.
Godzilla what again?
-1.
Godzilla -1. It's
The new Japanese one.
The newest. Yeah, it's amazing.
Oh, buddy,
it's fantastic.
I'm gonna go down this rabbit hole.
I'm so impressed by people using a little to make a lot. Anyone who could take something very simple and make you believe. Wasn't that the tagline of the film of like, you'll believe a man can fly?
Well, your brother did.
Yeah, he did. Captain Gravity.
That was good. So on the journey into space, baby Kal-El hears his father's voice teaching him through the crystallized data.
Okay, I had a question about that.
Well, he's a baby. He can't understand the words, if that's what you mean.
No, I understand that. On Krypton, the green kryptonite isn't poisonous to him. And is that because of the effects of the red sun does not make that radioactive or poisonous? But on Earth, with its yellow sun, is that what?
My understanding of it was always that Superman only has these abilities because he's in our environment, like no one's flying around on Krypton in these sequences, and being here naturally gives them these abilities. And so when he's exposed to an element from his home world, it makes him human. I think back to like Superman Returns, he doesn't feel pain. He's never had to feel pain. And then Lex Luthor stabs him in the side with a piece of kryptonite. Well, now he's human. So like that's the way I always looked at it, is just it reduces him back to us and our vulnerabilities.
I can go with that.
Logically, it makes a lot of sense.
They justify it in the film of saying something of like, the radiation of something like this would be catastrophic to him or whatever, because it's just a foreign element that would kind of undo the elements that empower him here, you know?
You know, Superman is kind of a
Mary Sue
potato of a lot of, you know, mythology and biblical lore, you know, and so I guess that's his Achilles heel, right? I mean, even Achilles, you know, the impenetrable Achilles warrior had that spot on his heel where he could be wounded and killed. So I guess they took a little bit from that mythology and that's his Achilles heel.
Like everyone needs a weakness.
It's like anytime I'm fighting a baby, I know he's got the soft spot on his head, you know, so like if I really just can't defeat him, that's what I go for, you know. Not even that. You just two fingers, just straight arm, just pop, you know, knocks him right out. It's great.
Buenas noches.
Wow.
Yeah. If you ever get into a fight in the hospital nursery, that's how you do it. Because, I mean, it's a numbers thing. There's a lot of them and there's only one of you. So, like, you know, sometimes.
And for the weakness.
Yeah, exactly. Work smarter, not harder. That's what I'm saying.
Doing my best.
So, yeah, as time passes, he is hearing these lessons in his father's voice. You know, we see him start to grow, and then the escape pod collides with Earth like an asteroid. And we see this from the vantage point of Jonathan and Martha Kent driving home in rural Kansas, and they see this thing smash into the field in like a big fireball. And it's so crazy. Like, you really feel like you're in a place that time forgot when these people roll through, because everything's so futuristic and crazy on Krypton. And then here we are like, oh shit, what year is this? You know?
When he landed, right? And this is what happened. I started texting you guys. I was in, I forgot.
You're watching it on the big screen with your front window open. Is that what it is?
Yeah, I'm over here with my 75-inch screen TV. And I'm like, there's a baby wiener
blowing up the whole size of my wall.
And I completely forgot like that was okay in late 70s.
Right.
And like, of course, things changed because things got weird. But I was like, wait a minute.
HBO Max? I don't think the cops are going to knock on your door for watching Superman.
I was just like, I'm like, HBO Max is okay with this? Like, oh my God. And like my mind was so modern where I'm like,
this isn't right.
Like, wait a minute. I was like 6 when I was staring at that baby wiener.
It probably looked just like yours. I said, what, are you afraid of Nirvana records too? Come on, it's fine.
That's exactly what happened. And I was like, oh, wait, you know what? I got to remember this is the time that it came out. And like, that was okay for it to be on TV. And that was like, all right, cool. Let me adjust back to.
It's like those disclaimers on Disney Plus. They're like, this was made in a different time and may have elements that.
Exactly. And then I continued joking with you guys. But still, I was like, oh, man, I was not ready for that. I mean, all right, cool. 1978.
I was like, Superman? Sure. Not after that scene, buddy. Anyway.
I was in the pool!
It's cold in space.
I was a baby. Of course it's little.
So here, as Jonathan is changing the tire, because they kind of were run off the road when they see this thing fly out of the sky, we get a little bit of foreshadowing about his heart condition. He mentions that as he's changing the tire. And there's a little foreshadowing also as we hear Jor-El's voice in the escape pod. God damn it, Bruce, he's eating my fucking headphone cord. Hey, this is why I said you couldn't be in here. Shit.
He's a cat. He does whatever he wants.
And he says, you know, under no circumstances can you interfere with the course of human history, right? We get that little gem in there as well. And as the Kents discuss what they're going to do, the truck slips off of the jack and almost crushes Jonathan Kent, but the truck doesn't touch the ground. And shocked, he looks up to see young Kal-El holding up the truck with his bare hands, just a dumb little grin on his face.
That part is so iconic. I never forgot that. Never forgot that. I think the first time I watched this had to be before I watched Batman.
Yeah.
And that's a part that just sat. The moment I saw it again, I was like, wow, what's such an iconic visual part, especially like growing up.
Well, it's also an homage to that Action Comics cover where he's lifting the truck.
He's like picking it up.
Action number one, he's holding the car, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not a big Superman reader. I've always loved the films. And if you listen to this show, you'll know I got into comics later in life and particularly focused on Batman. And so, I've read a lot of Superman, Batman stories. I've read Kingdom Come, things like that. But I haven't read a lot of solo Superman titles and action comic stuff. So
Same.
when I did some reading, and there's a lot in this film that is taken directly off the page. So much of this film. Lines, scenarios, character style, a lot was
The way
taken
it should be.
straight from the books, and it's kind of a perfect adaptation being, the first of its kind. It had to be very true to the source material.
Yeah. Especially like we live in an age now where like everyone wants to like make it their own.
Yeah. Well, because we've seen it all before. You got to give us something new,
Everyone wants to make it their own. Like the fact that this movie, especially we'll talk about this later when we rate it, the fact that this movie had so much of the comic book likeness and script at the same time. And like, they pulled things here and there and it just made the movie that much better. We're watching it now. Here we are, 2024, when the movie came out, 40...
A long time ago.
Yeah, a long time ago.
46 years ago?
46 years ago. And that's like,
crazy.
So enjoyable. Like even like the first parts we just spoke about. I was at my comic shop earlier today and I spoke about this movie and everyone was like, oh my God, how great is it? And I was like, listen to the podcast. We'll tell you.
So here we cut forward to high school age. This is already the third different period we're seeing this character, from the baby to sort of the toddler or whatever, holding up the truck and introducing to his family. And then we just cut way ahead, maybe 15 years. And Clark, as he's now referred, is cleaning up for the football team when a cheerleader asks if he wants to come hang out with them. You want to come listen to some records? It'll be swell, And one of the players pulls a dick move and knocks down all the uniforms off the bench. And so
Brad
Clark can't come. And when they drive away, he punts a football in anger, like a mile away out of the frame.
Yeah.
And then sprints past and around a train and is waiting for them at his driveway when they pass by in that car. And they're like, how'd you get here so fast? And he just says, I ran.
He was running like the Flash in the new Flash movie.
Yeah, I love that
bad.
sequence. And you get the little girl seeing him on the train and he just kind of waves.
Yeah.
When they drive off, Jonathan Kent is there and he has a real touching heart-to-heart moment. And he asks him, hey, you've been showing off a little bit lately? And Clark is a little frustrated. He's like, is it showing off if somebody's doing the things they're capable of doing? Is a bird showing off when he flies? And Jonathan's like, no, but I believe there is a reason that you are here, and it isn't to score touchdowns. And I like that we don't get a lot of screen time with the Kents, but they're showing you this is where he gets his values from.
Right, yeah. And I think Kent's wrong. He should have played football. It would have been awesome.
He would have crushed.
It would have been awesome. The cheerleader was Lana Lang, which...
Is she a character from the comics?
Yes, and she's very embedded in the Superman lore. So many characters in the Superman stories that have like the LL literary names. You got Lana Lang, Lois Lane, Lex Luthor, Kal-El. LL for some reason is a
LL Cool J is hard as hell.
yeah, exactly.
Ladies love him.
I'm a hip-hop gangster and my name is Todd.
She's in a lot of stories. She actually becomes, I think, Superwoman in one version of the Superman book. So, yeah, she's kind of an important character from his childhood.
Well, that's cool. And Clark is seemingly cheered up by this little chat, and he jokingly challenges his dad to a race up the driveway. He jogs up a little bit to the barn, sees the dog, and what he doesn't see is Jonathan grabs his arm, collapses in the dirt. Martha screams, and we transition to the funeral, where Clark says, all this power, and I still couldn't save him. And this is the first of many, many Uncle Ben, Thomas and Martha Wayne type origin stories that we will see for decades to come, that this hero, this icon that so many of us aspire to, was born of tragic circumstances. It's really incredibly well done. But one of the reasons I don't as often come back to origin stories, whether it's Superman, Batman Begins, Man of Steel, is because we have seen these type of things so many times. But fortunately, I was able to kind of put myself in a different headspace when I watched this film for the podcast of like, oh man, I remember how this felt and it's so, exciting. And this scene's very touching. And I thought Glenn Ford's performance here is incredible. And the fact that we get a double origin story, like we're 30 minutes in to all the Krypton history. And then we're getting this, and for it to still be effective is a testament to the actors really selling it, I feel like.
Totally agree. Young Clark is just really trying to find who he is and where he fits in this world. He doesn't really know where he's from. He just knows that he can do things that no one else can, and he just lost the only father figure he's ever known. And,
yeah, it's like, what's the point of all this if I can't even help the people that I care about?
Exactly. That starts the wheels in motion for his journey.
I got to find myself.
Yeah, and actually the next scene, Clark goes digging through the barn and the Kryptonian escape pod, and he finds the kryptonite. Shortly after, he tells his mom it's time for him to leave, and that he's spoken to a neighbor who's going to help take care of the house for her. And she's like, yeah, I knew this would happen. You got to go and find yourself and find your purpose, and you get a wide shot of the farm that transitions to the Arctic, where Clark visits Elf at the North Pole. I thought that it was funny. You said that though earlier. You were like, yeah, at the North Pole or whatever. I was like, wait, I 100% was thinking when he hops across the little chunk of ice in the water. I was like, oh my God, see you later, Mr. Norwal.
Bye, buddy. Before that, there was when his mom saw him going around the field.
Yeah.
There was a perfectly placed box of Cheerios.
I didn't notice the product placement.
She was watching him, and then the camera went to her watching him, and it was and there's a Cheerios box again. And I'm like, oh.
It's like, eat your Wheaties and you can run like this.
Yeah, these mofos knew exactly what they were doing back then. I get it.
So do you think he ran all the way up to the North Pole like that?
Who knows, man? We know he didn't fly. Now, for some reason, and they don't explain this, I'm not sure he even knew what would happen, but he goes out here into the middle of the Arctic and grabs the kryptonite out of his bag and then just hucks it into the snow.
That's where I was like, okay, if kryptonite's supposed to be harmful to him, how can he still throw this so far?
That's true. Yeah, I wonder why that was able to go flying so far.
Maybe he wasn't 18 yet or something. I don't know.
Is that invincible? You don't fully have your powers until you in high school or whatever. It erupts, bright lights and explosions and giant shards of crystals that form what we now know is the Fortress of Solitude. And just as a side note, I have actually rapped over this awesome musical number in this score here a long, long time ago because I love the music so much that we sampled it from my old group. But inside, Clark sees an interactive projection of Jor-El, and he's able to speak with it, and it responds. And he asks, "Who am I?" Jor-El tells him his real name, Kal-El, before a montage of lessons, both human and Kryptonian. And at the end of this sequence, we get a distant shot of Christopher Reeve in Superman attire. So some time has passed here. He's grown up. He spent a lot of time learning about his history and his place in the universe. And then in this quick shot of Superman at a distance, he flies right past the camera and we get that triumphant theme song. And I checked the time, and for 48 minutes into the movie, it's quite a tease. They still don't show their hand until later on. They just give you a little bit to keep you going.
So when he goes and interacts with this Jor-El hologram,
yeah,
he teaches him about who he is and where he came from and all this stuff. Am I correct in that was kind of a 12-year process where he actually went on a voyage to outer space and stuff?
I don't know. I mean,
Dave, you've watched it 14 times. Is
yeah,
that what
I mean, it seemed like he was there a long fucking
It
time.
seemed
I don't
like
know
it was
if
like a training thing. It seemed like the only thing I can compare it to is like Batman Begins, right? Like where he just
I
disappears.
just remember
and, like,
him
you really
saying
can't-
something for 12 years, and then he's back, and he's got this suit that
I
somehow.
mean, you're gonna make me click back on this real quick. Let's,
yeah, I mean, that adds up to me for sure. I thought the shots of space were more metaphorical as it's giving you, visuals through this montage, because we're getting kind of clips of what Jor-El's saying, and it's just cruising through all this information, and we're just getting little snippets. So,
And he also said, we put you as a child in this spaceship to escape the planet Krypton. And because I think Jor-El said, if you're seeing this, I've been dead now for thousands of years.
yeah.
So that tells you Kal-El, Superman, is like 2,000 years old, which...
Well, I don't think that's right, though. Like, I remember reading Supergirl, right? The whole thing about her being younger than him, even though she was sent first and she was born first and she was sent to Earth first. But for some reason, her fucking pod went off the rails and didn't get to there until way later. And so, like, her development was like stunted because she never got there. She was in this fucking cocoon thing all this time. And so she arrived there younger than him when she was actually born first or some weird shit like that.
Yeah, I just thought it was interesting, how Jor-El said, if you're watching this, I've been dead for thousands of years already. And
I could have been a wild guess.
I'm thinking like interstellar rules, like, okay, we're this far away, we're on this planet, time's going by way faster over here.
Well, I mean, to go across the 28 galaxies that they mentioned in this story, in this movie, that's going to take a lot of light years. And supposedly this craft that he was in was kind of like an incubator and kept him from aging just like they do in Thundercats. That's why Lionel's younger than all them.
There you go.
His pod kept him younger.
There you go. Yeah.
So, but I also thought it was...
That's what the rich people are going to invent here on Earth soon. That's their Benjamin Button machines.
Again, going back to the mythology, the religious aspect, because Superman's kind of a god here.
Yeah.
And I believe the creators were of Jewish descent. So in a way, it was kind of a allegory towards creating him to be like a godlike, almost Jesus Christ type, figure.
Yeah, and there's lots of that symbolism in Superman stories.
Mm-hmm.
So next, as you mentioned, we're seeing Clark fully grown, suited up, playing by Chris Reeve at the Daily Planet. And Jimmy Olsen is helping Lois spell the words bloodletting, massacre, and then she walks into Perry White's office to turn in her story, and he looks at it and says there's only one P in rapist. So bloodletting, massacre, and rapist. What the fuck is she writing about? She's like, it's got sex, it's got drugs, it's got the ethnic angle, whatever she's talking about. I'm like, I want to know what the fuck this article is about. But yeah, Clark fully evolved now. We see the suit and glasses we're accustomed to seeing, and he tries to introduce himself to Lois, who doesn't even notice that he's there. Jimmy Olsen, young photographer, is the only one to introduce himself. And when Perry asks Clark to open a bottle, he struggles and struggles quite comically before dumping it everywhere. And when Lois finally addresses him now, she apologizes for shaking it up. I didn't mean to. And he's like, of course you wouldn't mean to. Why would you make a total stranger look like a fool? And then everyone just stops like, what is with this guy?
Why is he so nice?
He's just so fucking awkward, and I love this performance. It's like the blueprint for Kevin Conroy's Batman of the full duality of the characters,
It's so funny how this movie you can pin it in so many categories, and this is where, it's a movie, it's a superhero movie that's not afraid to make fun of itself in a way.
Yeah.
The way that Christopher Reeve portrays the silliness of Clark Kent versus the, just the regal, gentlemanly, shining superhero of Superman. I mean, it just really shows
It's night and day.
his talent.
Yeah.
His full spectrum and his talents.
Perry puts Clark onto Lois's beat in the city, and she makes fun of him for sending half of his check home, quote, to his sweet gray-haired old mother. And he corrects her. Actually, she's silver-haired. All right. And at the end of the day, he follows her outside like a lost puppy, and she makes fun of him again for saying, "It's been swell," which I find amusing because I use the word swell unironically. And then outside, a mugger pulls them into an alley at gunpoint, and Clark tries to reason with the man, who says, "You know, you're right. I'm going to turn over a new leaf right after I rip off this lady's purse." Puts the gun back up. Lois lowers her bag to the ground. When the guy bends over to pick it up, she kicks him in the chest. The gun goes off, and Clark, unseen by her, catches the bullet. The mugger runs away, and Clark is on the ground. He doesn't pretend to be shot, but to have fainted. Lois grabs her bag and sarcastically mutters, "Swell." I love that. And then Clark says, "Was it worth risking your life for $10, 2 credit cards, a hairbrush, and a lipstick?" And this is the first thing that really piques her interest. Like, what did you just say? That's the exact contents of my purse right now. And he's like, "Oh, it's a lucky guess. I don't know."
What did modern kids say? He had no Riz, and then he had all the Riz.
Well, it's funny because this is like his first time, like, I have invented really now this alter ego.
Yeah.
I know what my purpose is, and part of that's going to be I have to live. I have to fit in to this community as well and not raise any red flags, right? And so he's trying this out on her and then accidentally shows his hand already, you know?
Yeah. Part of the character of Clark Kent is that really him just fully 100% acting in that role, or I can imagine him being in the Fortress of Solitude for however many years doing his super studies.
Forgetting how to talk to a human being.
I mean, he's going to kind of be a little socially awkward, and plus he's also from Smallville, and now he's in this big city of Metropolis, but part of me says, well, he's probably acting it up, but there probably is some social awkwardness.
For sure, but we see him confidently speak to people when he's in the suit. And
yeah.
I'm sure that's probably a part of his childhood embarrassment that he maybe carries into Clark of like, oh, I know what that's like to not fit in. I can play on that, you know?
And in the suit, he doesn't have to hide himself. He doesn't have to hide his powers. He doesn't have to hide all the things he's been hiding his entire life.
So like Batman, Clark is the mask.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so is Bruce.
Totally. And here we cut to Ned Beatty, the powerhouse actor from the film Network, who plays an absolute doofus named Otis. And this cracks me up, especially the goofy tuba theme song. You know, like got a fucking Oompa Loompa vibe going on. And I just think it's amazing. Like we get this actor that, you know, as a kid, I don't think anything of it, but as an adult, having seen him in other things, and he's fucking brilliant and has this intensity about him. And then you see him just play this goofy fucking idiot. He's trying to steal from a blind guy at the newsstand and the dog barks at him. And just the subtle comedy is really playing for me here.
He almost kind of steals the movie a little bit once he comes into it because of the things that he does. You're right. I mean, he's pretty funny.
Yeah, he's kind of a scene stealer. And here, 2 cops notice him, and one follows and one calls for backup. Following him, they go into the subway, onto the tracks, through a series of twists and turns, and Otis waits for a passing train and then enters a secret doorway to Lex Luthor's underground lair. And we don't yet see him, but Luthor watches on security cameras and jokes, "It's amazing that brain has enough power to keep those legs moving." And it's a lighthearted gag, but is undercut by the next thing he does, which he's watching the security footage. And when the cop shows up on this platform, he waits for the train to start coming. And with a button, he pushes the fucking door outward, and the guy gets thrown in front of the moving train. Luthor's henchwoman is in the room, Miss Tessmacher. She calls him sick and twisted. And Luthor asks, why does the greatest criminal mind of our time surround himself with nincompoops? He has a great vocabulary in this movie. I love the terms that he uses. And when Otis comes in, he brings the newspaper. And the front page says, "Twin nuclear missile test confirmed." He looks at it and says, they're about to be part of the greatest real estate swindle in history. The tone changes a bit in the film with all these characters, kind of like you said. And I think all this shit is funny. Like Otis constantly saying, Mr. Luthor. I almost wonder if that's a joke on Marlon Brando not saying Krypton correctly or something. Like it's funny every time. And like Miss Tessmacher interrupting, where Luthor's like, it reminds me of something that my father said to me when I was young. She goes, get out. Like, no, before that, or like he's got these delusions of grandeur as Lex Luthor always does. And he's like, you're living in a Park Avenue address. And she's like, really? This like subterranean dungeon they're in?
Like you said, their interaction brings a comedic element.
I mean, we're about an hour into the film and it's been pretty fucking serious.
Yeah.
And a lot of fucked up things are happening,
Yeah, we go from science fiction to drama to
a lot of character building.
Yeah. Now we got a comedic element. And
the fact that Richard Donner balances all those things, those different tones that shouldn't work together the way that they do, I think that's very impressive, and he would go on obviously to make like Lethal Weapon and things that blend action and humor in ways that are very entertaining. But this movie, like for the most part, takes itself more seriously. And then somehow these characters still exist and it works.
Yeah.
Now here we get more bumbling Clark Kent at the Daily Planet. And I'm reminded of Kill Bill 2, which to me is one of the greatest observations about Superman, when Bill himself says that Clark's ineptitude is a reflection of how Superman views us as normal people. I love that scene.
Clark Kent is Superman's critique on the whole human race.
Kill Bill 2 is so good. I watched that in college so many times.
In the next scene, Lois gets in a helicopter on the roof of the Daily Planet. And during takeoff, it gets tangled in this cable on the ground and it winds up hanging off the side of the roof, the whole copter. And the pilot's knocked unconscious. Lois is screaming. She's hanging over an open door, just the street below, the whole skyscraper, all this, right? And this is the perfect introduction for Superman as we get Clark running outside on the street, rip the chest of his shirt open to reveal the symbol underneath. He does the quick change in the turnstile and our first real shot of him in flight and our first of many Lois Lane rescue scenes. Like there's so much that happens here just in a very short time.
That was a great scene because it was like, again, like you said, it was a great introduction to everyone who was there. And everyone was like, oh my God, this flying guy, who the hell is he? But I was stuck on when he went through the revolving doors. I was like, yo, where does your suit go?
Where'd the other clothes go?
Yeah. And then I was like, do you ever go back and pick it up? Because I'm like, so.
He's got a cape jammed down into his pants.
He just stuffs it down the front of his trunk.
Yeah.
His first day on the job, he follows her out and he gets stuck in the revolving door at first, right? Remember that? So
that's true.
I thought that was a cool callback.
But that's a perfect example of like how he plays off this dumbass side of him, And one of the things that I loved about the first Wonder Woman movie is that it's very similar in certain ways, and they'll take like the robbery in the alley, right, and they'll flip it. All this stuff just runs through superhero iconography to this day.
So Lois was going on an assignment to interview the president, right, who was coming in on Air Force One. That's why she was in the helicopter, and the cable got caught up in the landing gear of the helicopter, and that's what caused the tragedy. I just liked whenever Superman did the spin thing and changed into his suit the first time, and that guy in the car says,
"That's a bad outfit, man." Which,
oh my God,
that was great.
Another movie that's very referential, being Shazam, I think is a direct callback to this, because when we first see him on the subway in the suit, there's a black dude on the subway that looks at him and he's like, man, you got the red and the white cape and it shouldn't work, but goddamn, you look good, or something like that. Like that's got to be a direct reference to this movie.
I loved it. It was so funny. So
I like
funny.
when you rescued her and it was like, I got you. And she's like, huh?
Who's got you?
Who's got you? And I was like,
classic, man.
Yeah, that was so good.
This scene is so iconic. So, like, he's flying up there as she slips out. She lost her grip. She falls screaming. He catches her. We get that iconic line. And then the helicopter falls on top of them as they're going upward. And he effortlessly catches this thing and guides them all to the roof to safety.
That grip.
This is where we get the line that they used in Superman Returns, where he says, statistically speaking, it's still the safest way to travel.
He's not wrong.
Still, it's not right, and it freaks me out. I don't like it.
But then he goes on a rampage of like saving everyone.
Yeah, this is a massive action montage here where it's like, okay, we know you guys have been patiently waiting, so now we're going to give you all the Superman heroics at
He's
once.
like, I got my suit on. People know who the hell I am. I just did it. I saved the woman I love. Let's go in.
Yeah,
it's on.
He's feeling good at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we get him flying over Metropolis, and then he stops an old-fashioned jewel thief who's scaling the building with suction cups on his knees. And this, to me, is a brilliant update on the Adam West wall climbing shot, because it was the sideways camera, right? They're climbing the rope, Batman and Robin, you know. And here we get that, but with the added big budget of special effects, like, you know, we see Superman standing there, and then the guy falls, and he flies past the falling guy and stands there, and the guy just brick walls into him. Like, this is such an impressive little sequence to me too.
Yeah, I like the guy that's sitting in his office too, when Superman's standing against the glass, and he's like,
He's like, what? Did I hear something?
No, yeah,
couldn't be.
Let me continue my overtime. I got family to get to.
And after that, Superman stops a heist on their getaway boat, which made me think of the Jack Nicholson joke in The Departed when the Chinese smugglers are leaving the handoff on a fucking boat.
They didn't figure we had a navy.
But this is another iconic shot where Superman's on the boat. The henchman sneaks up behind him with a crowbar and whacks him over the head, and just cartoonishly ricochets like a Bugs Bunny thing, you know. Right. I don't like the bad vibrations line, but I do like the reaction to it anyway.
I guess he took the boat and put it right in front of the police station.
Look at these cops inside are talking about all these Superman stories, and the dude's partner or whatever is like, man, you got to take the night off. You're seeing things.
Let's go to the bar. Yeah.
It's like the first bottle's on me.
Yeah. They walk outside and they see the whole fucking boat in the middle with the robbers tied up on top of it. And it's just a boat in fucking middle of Metropolis or Manhattan, you know, whatever. And he's like, okay, first round's on me. Yeah. Which it reminds me a little bit of Ghostbusters. They see the Titanic has arrived. You know?
Oh, yeah.
And the mayor's like, okay, somebody call the Ghostbusters, you know. And afterward, Superman rescues a kitty from a tree. And when the little girl goes inside to tell her mom, she goes, haven't I told you not to tell lies?
What?
Smack her in the face.
Wait,
man.
I didn't catch that.
It's like she runs in.
We're just seeing the outside of the house still.
Yeah, you don't see it.
Audio.
You hear it, though. It's like, I told you to stop lying.
Bam.
Oh, you hear is a smack.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Oh, my God. PTSD,
again.
Guys. PTSD.
Yeah, man. That's the 70s.
Yeah, I just thought it was, you know, Superman is always seen as this endearing character. And, you know, as he flies away after saving the cat, he turns to her and he says, bye. Just real nice. Mm-hmm. I was just like, wow, okay.
Yeah, but
then we get a really dark joke in there.
Yeah, but even Superman didn't hear that slap because he would have came back.
What if he had came back and took Dad to
that would be a hilarious post-credits scene if they did those back then.
Yeah.
You know?
Slap, and Superman just comes back and is like, don't touch your daughter. What? And it's like, oh, crap, I just called your mom. Sorry. Here's another origin story.
Yeah.
And she grows up to be his greatest villain or whatever.
Yeah. She works for Luthor.
All right, so
she grows up to be Catwoman.
Then there's a plane that loses the left engine, and Superman flies up and carries the wing to steady them to safety.
It's Air Force One.
Yeah, and so it's a full circle moment to the beginning of this whole sequence with Lois going off to meet them. And then we get a bunch of talking heads on TV before a furious Lex Luthor demands that they turn it off. And he then considers that maybe the crime of the century will also be paired with the challenge of the century as well. He looks at Superman's existence as like, well, this could be a big obstacle, but you know what? No one can outsmart me. I'll find a way.
His ego is also his
biggest weakness.
Yep.
Yeah. At the Daily Planet, Perry demands that his reporters find out about this mystery hero. Lois is obviously smitten. She's got this dumb grin on her face, and she receives a note to meet later that night. Now, Superman shows up on her balcony, which she must make a lot for a reporter because you're in fucking Manhattan. You got this penthouse and a huge balcony like this, man. Like, she's got to be doing well. This whole sequence is classic. He's X-raying her lungs to see if the smoking has given her
he tells her
cancer or anything. You really shouldn't smoke, Miss Lane.
Right.
He declines the wine because he doesn't drink and fly. He's just this beacon of morality. It's kind of a reverse. Let's say a famous actress will go on a late night show and she's interviewed all these dumb questions, about her love life or whatever. So here she's asking all these flirtatious questions. Do you have a girlfriend? How big are you? Well, I mean, how tall are you? And
right.
Does the rest of your body work normally? And like, what color underwear am I wearing? And do you like pink? And like all this stuff. It's also just kind of an entertaining way of exposing that he can't see through lead and little things like that,
I was really surprised he divulged that weakness to her, but also maybe showed how much he trusted her. But he knows that she's a reporter. He was in the same room whenever Perry was, saying, find out everything you can about this guy.
Yeah.
And that's why I was surprised. Oh, he's going to tell her his big weakness. Well, one of his big weaknesses is that he can't see through lead.
At this point, he doesn't really he's never been tested.
Yeah.
For him, there's no real reason to be that secretive.
So that's very genuine. He had no idea like someone was going to do anything bad to him because it was like, oh, I'm a good guy. Everyone loves me. I'm going to do the right thing.
Yeah.
When he said these things, he didn't think I was doing malice against him.
Yeah, I think that's maybe that Smallville naivety that you guys are pointing out a little bit ago. It's like, yeah, maybe there is still a bit of that in him of like, well, I'm going to assume the good and tell you anything you want to know, except for my age. He's like, well, I'm older than 21.
More than 21.
And Superman offers to take her up and fly together. And this scene is nothing short of majestic. The view, their faces, the beautiful music.
Hold on. You mentioned music. The biggest thing that I take from this movie, and it reminds me like just a lot of movies in the 70s and 80s, even like early 90s, just the usage of like orchestra.
Yeah.
I feel like recent movies or like anything past like mid 90s, it became so much pop culture. We had to use like modern day music with words and stuff to like actually have feelings and stuff. But like when you listen,
a little too much James Gunn.
Yeah, a little too much. But when you like listen to like the trumpets hit out of nowhere and you get this goosebumps, and I was like, oh man, like.
And they do these really dynamic swells too, where it'll be like, that like fucking move you, man. And I think that's one of the enduring things about like Shirley Walker and Batman the Animated Series.
100%. And I feel like that's what like added to the recent Batman movie. It wasn't like, oh, we're going to play some Lil Wayne or something.
Let the bodies hit the floor.
Yeah,
Let the bodies.
Like, no, we're going to have you like play some music that fits what's happening right now in the movie. And you're going to be like, oh my God, like, all right, what the hell is going on? Why is this music playing? Because every time music plays, something's happening. And
it's an emotional score. It really, you could almost use the word, it underscores the feeling that you have in every one of these scenes, whether it's the tragedy of Krypton and how epic that whole sequence is, or whether it's this beautiful romantic moment. And one of the only mistakes of the whole movie, in my opinion, is to extend this with her rhyming inner monologue, because no other place in the film is there narration aside from the child in the beginning before the film starts.
Yeah.
It seems so out of place to me. And then we can read all that on her face. We can see that she is so taken by him, and that this experience, no one on earth has ever had this experience, and this closeness. And I think that like the shot where he's letting her go looser and looser, and then she falls screaming, and he has to catch her to come close. Like, I think you could have easily done that by like, okay, getting looser and looser, and like, okay, whoa, hey, let's pull you back in. And you could still,
dude, like Jesus, man.
You could still have that moment, but I feel like that's one of the only missteps of the film is like this scene is maybe 2 minutes too long.
But it was also like a sense of like, hey, I got you, trust me.
Sure,
I think he did that on purpose because he wanted to rescue her and hold her tight and make that connection a little closer.
I just feel like you could do that with a quick slip and not a full screaming fall.
It was like, hey, I'm going to gaslight you by thinking that you're about to die. And
like your heart would still be pounding even if you lost 2 inches up there. I mean, come on, man.
But guess what? I'm here for you and I got you, babe. I love you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
She didn't have to fall 50 feet first,
Yeah, the whole love poem that she says to herself in her mind, she says, can you read my thoughts and all this stuff?
Yeah, I hate it with a passion.
Yeah.
My only thought was that because in this movie, Superman, in fact, the whole franchise, Superman does some things that I think are a little outside of what he does in the comics. I could be wrong because I'm not a big Superman fan and reader. But
I feel bad not reading it. Sorry, Superman fans.
I just read Superman Unchained, just side note, and I fucking loved it, by the way. So if you find yourself a copy of
Scott Snyder?
Yeah, and Jim Lee. Yeah, if you find yourself a copy of the new deluxe hardcover of that, I would highly recommend it.
Dunk doesn't have time for that.
I just thought the whole...
Oh, yeah, I got to watch this movie 3 times. I don't have time to read.
I'd rather watch the movie. I like visuals.
I just thought the whole love poem that she was saying to herself, one, it was kind of showing how she's falling, but also maybe some insight into his powers. Maybe he could read her mind in a way.
No, I don't think so.
You don't know?
They didn't give you any reason to think that he could do that.
Well, watch Superman 2.
We will. We will.
In about like 3 podcasts from now, we'll discuss this.
All right. So the comedy returns when Clark knocks on her door immediately after this, and she is completely lost in thought after flying around town with Superman. And
to me, I always thought Chicago was kind of the representation of Metropolis, but apparently it is in the Northeast.
It's Manhattan.
Metropolis originally was Manhattan. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not like Marvel where it's like, I'm in Hell's Kitchen and you're going to be over here in Midtown and you're going to be over there in the East Village.
Right.
It's like, no, I run this borough, bro. Get the fuck out of here.
What I like about this scene is that she is so enamored with him in the suit and then so indifferent as Clark in the same sequence. Like we just see 10 minutes of her falling in love with this dude. And then he comes and knocks on her door and like, hey, you ready for our date, Lois? And she's like, yeah, what the fuck ever, man.
like, bro, I was fine.
He loves the idea that he left such an impression on her.
To him, it's almost like a game.
And just immediately takes off his glasses, Lois, and uses his real voice for a moment. And he's about to confess his identity. And she comes in and he loses his nerve and reverts back to the shtick. And we're planting the seeds for the sequel here. But it's the second time where he almost gives it away to her very quickly in this story.
Oh, yeah. It's always that cat and mouse chase, the whole game between the two.
The next day, Luther reads her article, I Spent the Night with Superman, and becomes fascinated with Superman's origin and the possibility that there could be undiscovered particles from the exploded Krypton that landed on Earth. He's deduced that pieces of Superman's planet might be harmful to him after growing up on Earth's atmosphere. Miss Tessmacher dismisses the idea, saying that Superman would see it coming. Luther assures her that quite literally he couldn't see it if it's hiding in lead, and that would be enough to blindside him, because why would he expect this, right?
And just like that, a villain is born.
It really kind of shows, his super intelligence to deduce all this, to take that from the story. And, he already showed some research where someone had found this big green rock, and he put things together so quickly.
Yeah.
And I know they did this for the movie, but, it does show that he is a very super intelligent guy.
Yeah.
I guess I just find it amusing that he's using all this intellect on a person who's really of no consequence to him, just because he feels like this guy is somehow stealing his thunder, right? And so, like, he could be using this brain power on any number of things to help the world, but it's all in this selfish attempt at, like, self-aggrandizement,
He's a spoiled brat. That's what he's like, I'm smarter than everyone. I need to show people how. And in a way, like, when you think about it, just what I said, he wants to show that he's smarter than someone who's not part of this planet.
Yeah.
His ego's like, I'm smarter
like,
than
I'm the
this.
smartest person here. I'm the smartest person anywhere.
I'm the
Fuck
smartest
you.
person anywhere. Oh, this guy is strong and powerful. I'm better than him.
I can take him down. Yeah.
Yeah, very insecure.
He drives a pickup truck.
And here we see the beginning.
He has a 350. F-350.
I have a small penis.
Although I want one. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, I'm 6'7". I want a big truck, but...
You want to know what I drive? I drive a big Ford F-350 with no muffler.
Sure you do.
That's because you have a giant cock and you want everyone to know.
You got to have room.
Need all that space in the back for your comics.
My legs.
Long boxes. All right, so here's the beginning of Luther's scheme. He remotely drives a car and wrecks it, staging Miss Tessmacher's body in a red dress, lipstick, blonde wig like Marilyn Monroe, just laying out there next to the car. And this stops an army convoy in its tracks. The commanding officer pushes his men aside and suggests mouth-to-mouth and a vigorous chest massage. And
could they make this movie today?
No. Either that or that guy would have to get his ass kicked somehow.
We're lucky to be discussing it.
I was just cracking up going, my God. Wow.
And when the ambulance arrives, the EMT is Luther. And the whole thing is just a diversion so that Otis could get onto the Army's convoy, reset the coordinates on the test nuke that they were carrying. Now, predictably, Otis does it wrong. Next, they drive an 18-wheeler carrying a mobile home to block the road while Miss Tessmacher changes the coordinates on the naval nuke missiles. They have a similar thing, but they're playing different characters. Clark then comes to Perry, asking where's Lois, and she's out in the desert on assignment with Jimmy Olsen. They're investigating some real estate scheme where someone is buying useless land for exorbitant prices. He also mentions an ill-conceived museum burglary, but is interrupted when a high-pitched frequency that only Clark can hear practically deafens him.
Or dogs.
The cats on my couch didn't like it much either. Lex is threatening a massive gas attack, I believe, on the city. And so Clark dives out the window and midair transforms into Superman, which doesn't make sense, but looks awesome, so who cares?
Where's the suit go?
And he follows the sound downtown and spins so fast through the ground that he rips open the concrete and he pulls off the steel door to Lex Luthor's lair and walks right in. And Luthor was so cocky and undeterred. He jokes like, my attorney will be in touch for the damages. You know, like, I love how their first interaction is played out.
Yeah, even like the door says like danger, condemned. He goes through it and that's exactly what happens when Luthor's like, hey, well, my attorney's going to sue you for these damages. And it's where he meets everyone. I'm watching it right now again.
Yeah, here he explains his plan to flip all this useless land for profit by moving the coastline itself. And it's cut to reveal that nukes are being launched at the moment he's breaking this down, right? So he's getting a kick out of, I'm going to James Bond tell you my plan, but I'm going to do it after it's already started. So there's nothing you can do. He explains that this can be achieved by setting off explosions off the coast and triggering the San Andreas Fault. Meanwhile, we see the military base and the test missiles are going off course in opposite directions. The military can't figure it out. They can't control it. And back at the lair, Luthor screams, Miss Tessmacher!
Bring in the fembots!
And explains to Superman, well, this plan's already in motion. There's nothing you can do. And so Superman's looking around the room with his X-ray vision. He's going to figure it out. And he's like, oh, well, you think you could outsmart me with this lead-lined box? I'll show you. Cracks it open. Massive chunk of kryptonite. It's on a chain. Luthor ties it around his neck and pushes him into the pool. Great fucking sequence.
Yeah, just before that, pretty much shows him his plan and how like everything's going to branch off and it's going to belong to different people. And
Yeah, it's like Casa de Lex and this and that.
yeah,
and
and then like
Otisville.
yeah,
The fuck is Otisville?
the fuck is that? Well, I thought I was like, oh no, screw you, dude. You suck. You're a henchman. And so many parts of this movie is so great. But the fact that it's 1978, it was so freaking fun to watch.
Again, I'm not from this time, but I feel like there was just nothing like it back then. It's so wonderful. He explains part of his plan, was to send these missiles in opposite directions so that Superman can't stop them both. And when he mentions that the decoy is going to Hackensack,
New Jersey. Come on, man. I had to look up like why Hackensack, New Jersey. But then I had to think about it myself.
I think it's just because it's the opposite corner of the country, from the Southwest.
Like, Hackensack, New Jersey is so close to New York. It's like close to Fort Lee, close to the Hudson River. I'm like, maybe that's the reason. But why the fuck you just call out Hackensack, New Jersey? You could have said like...
But if you think about it, I mean, he literally just sent a missile to his back door.
Yeah,
that would
right next door.
Yeah,
blow him up too.
But he's moving out west.
Well, maybe he just knew the real estate would have blown up.
Also, he's underground, so
New Jersey.
I think he'd be okay.
Yeah, because
that makes sense then because they said that they were like 200 feet below ground.
Yeah.
So okay,
so many things.
Now I'm getting it.
I'm like, yo, leave Jersey alone, bro. Come on, man. Stop messing with
now
my
here
state.
we plant the seed of betrayal, and Miss Tessmacher was like, "Hey, my mother lives in Hackensack," and Lex is just like dismissive of it,
He's
like, hey, she had a good run, but. She lingers around the pool after everyone leaves and then helps Superman out of the water. And she actually steals a kiss when he's unconscious. And when he comes to, says, well, I didn't think you'd let me do it later. Like, again, another thing that they would not do today. Superman is instantly restored once the kryptonite is out of reach, which explains why it didn't affect him in the previous scene when it was in the lead case. It's really only when it's on him, I guess. And he flies off to stop the missiles. Now, this is another huge VFX sequence. He chases the missile through the air. He grabs it by the exhaust, blasted him in the face with the fire, and he redirects it up, flies it off into space. I love this shot.
Like, again, 1978, guys.
Yeah. I like how they took all the aerial footage and they sped it up to his speed, and then superimposed them on it.
His face is in it. He's pushing it up. And it's like, yo, this is almost 50 years ago. And this is so well done.
Gramps, you got a little grin on your face.
I'm just loving to hear.
You're like, these dumbasses. So easily entertained.
These monkeys.
He's like, look what I could do. No, it's like Baby Dunk.
Yeah.
Was like, yo, this is what we watched. Like, yo, this is so epic. So epic. And when I talked to people about it the last couple of days, a couple of my friends were on live. There's Tessa from PA. She has a store over in Philadelphia and in Pennsylvania. And she was just like, oh my God, that's one of my favorite movies. She's definitely younger than I am. And I was like, you have every right for that to be your favorite movie. Like, it's so freaking good. Like,
yeah,
1978. Wow. I'm amazed.
Yeah, this was a movie that I've seen countless times. And even recently, I think there's just something about the way we do this show in breaking down kind of every scene. And it really gave me a renewed appreciation for it, because I still have such a soft spot for it, but to really be more analytical and critical of it, it holds up so well.
100%.
It really does.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, when all this is happening in the sky, Lois and Jimmy are on the West Coast in the California desert. Jimmy is up on a dam when the second missile triggers an earthquake. And California looks like it's going to meet the same fate as Krypton. I really like the symmetry here where this big climax in the film kind of bookends the calamity that opened the film.
Yes. So much happens at once. You have Lois struggling. She's dodging the power lines.
Telephone poles fall down.
She's like, oh,
and
crap, left.
There's a rock slide on the other side of the road.
There's a rock slide. You have a Superman like somewhere in the core of the earth trying to like make sure that nothing gets separated.
Dude, this is fucking amazing. So we're seeing all this shit happen. The dam is starting to crack. Yeah. Lois is crashing off the road. There's major traffic accidents.
San Francisco bridge.
Yeah. The suspension bridge starts to collapse. There's a fucking train about to be derailed. And then Superman does not fly in and save these people one-on-one like he did in the earlier montage. He flies into the center of the earth. He flies into the center of the earth. And it's all fucking red and molten lava and shit. And he pushes the San Andreas fault back together.
Yeah, because Lex had said if you blow it up at certain points, it causes, the West Coast to fall apart. And then what's left will be, a gold mine as far as real estate and blah, blah, blah. So he's putting San Andreas fault back together.
Which is great because it shows how smart he is too, that like he had that brief exchange and then gets ambushed and all this shit. And like, oh my God, I got to save this. And as he's flying back there, he's going, oh, you know what? He said this spot right here. This is the linchpin of the whole fucking thing. If I go back and fix that, then I can stop everything. I love that. All the while, we see this damage, and he's then got to go save the falling school bus off the bridge. He uses himself as a human railroad track to save the train. I love it. The dam bursts, and Jimmy is hanging off the side, just dangling there. I love that they save Jimmy. They do it exactly the same way as he first saves Lois, because he's hanging there, and then just when he slips and loses his grip, that's when Superman catches. It's the same timing, and he's saving people from downed power lines, and he's fucking everywhere at once, and it's amazing. When he drops Jimmy Olsen to the ground, he's like, I'm okay. Miss Lane will be driving by any minute. And then he's like, oh, fuck.
That's where you mess up. You can't forget your woman, man. Don't forget your woman.
This scene is still gut-wrenching to me. It's so powerful. Man. But seeing this when I'm like, 4 or 5 years old, oh my God, it's scary. Lois is caught between the rock slide and now an earthquake. The car sinks into the ground. We're seeing the rock slide. It's all these quick cuts that, one, make it really convincing, but two, show you all the other terror that's happening. People running for their lives, the houses being flooded. That's the miniatures I was talking about. The dirt falling in the windows of her car as she's screaming. It's going into her mouth and she can't fucking breathe. Like
just being buried alive
before our eyes.
And that's not CGI.
No. Again, clever editing, very good editing in this scene.
Yeah. That's such an iconic scene. I mean, like you said, everyone knows about the death of Lois scene.
Yeah, I think people talk about, nowadays, the traumatic scene in my childhood, whether it's Bambi or The Lion King or whatever it was. But Bambi. Fucking this movie is gnarly too.
I'm watching it right now. I'm bugging out.
Now, just when he thinks that he's saved the day, Superman hears her faint screams and he flies to her rescue. When he gets there, it's too late. Lois was suffocated under the rubble. Now, in a brilliant choice, the music stops altogether. Superman pulls the car out of the ground. Then he pulls her out of the car, gently lowers her to the ground with a kiss. Another unconscious kiss, by the way. There's a beautiful moment of silence. The camera cuts about 3 times farther and farther away. And we just have this private moment of mourning. And when we return for the close-up, this is Christopher Reeve's best moment in the film. He's just incredible. The shock, the anguish, the panic, the way he's breathing, and then he just lets out this heartbreaking, gut-wrenching scream as he flies off into space. And it's funny because when people would criticize like Henry Cavill's Superman for, being too dark or angry or, whatever, I'm like, you do remember the first one, right? Like,
yeah. I know. That's what I don't get when people were making the argument about, in Man of Steel, how much destruction there was of the city and whatnot. And I was like,
yeah,
you've seen Superman 78, right?
Yeah.
The whole West Coast gets blown off.
Yeah. For real, man.
This one goes out of space and decides to...
Yeah, and we hear Jor-El, and I think this is like the 3rd time it's repeated in the movie, how you cannot mess with history here.
Yeah, we do hear it a 3rd time, to interfere with human history. It's forbidden. And when we hear Jonathan Kent saying, you were put here for a reason, son. And he flies up into space and in this rage, he flies backward against the rotation of the Earth, faster and faster and faster until it actually reverses. And the Earth is spinning backwards, and he turns back time.
Okay, hold up. So I remember like watching something on saying like when the world stops, what actually happens.
Right.
So I went down this rabbit hole of like, wait a minute, he stopped the world. That's worse. Not against anything around the movie.
You would have killed everybody at that point.
Yeah, because it's like gravity stops and like people get launched into space. Listen, we don't have tsunamis.
The oceans just
reason.
wash over the continent.
Yeah, it was like all these other things that I read up, and I was like, yo, bro, you just killed everyone, man.
It's like a how it should have ended video, you know, where he spins it backwards and like, whoops.
And I was like, all right, I killed everyone. All right, I got to find another planet to live on. And
you just shook up the ant farm, man. We're all dead now.
So when that happened, I was like, wait a minute.
He literally stopped the Led Zeppelin record, started playing it backward, and getting all the satanic messages.
It was like,
curl your
reversing
parents.
everything. Oh my God, you reverse everything, dude. What the hell are you doing? They just get the other people on the other side.
Well, we did learn that time and the Earth's rotation correlate with one another. Maybe this is what Marty McFly did as well.
This is one of those suspension of disbelief moments in
Just
the
let
film.
it go.
That's-
I know.
It's just so spectacular to watch this epic fucking move that I think we all kind of have that in the back of our head. Like, well, wouldn't that? Well, that's okay. It's great. It's fun.
As a kid, I remember watching that and I was like, oh my God, that's so cool. Now I'm a grown up and I have logic. And I was like, wait a minute. Scientists have said something about this. And
here I am. I've got the treadmill going backwards, trying to get younger. It's not working.
You're just going to become Reverse Flash or something.
yeah.
Now, the one thing that really doesn't make sense, though, is that he turns back time and then the earthquake just isn't happening anymore. That's what I don't understand.
I think because we reversed time, he did things faster, maybe. I don't know. I think it's like between the lines.
It doesn't really explain it because, like, Lois is not in the ground anymore. She's standing next to her car broken down, and it's sort of as if nothing ever happened, but it doesn't show how we went back and stopped it.
Unless you went back in time and it was like, oh, these nukes don't exist anymore. And then it was like, all right, now we're here, guys. All right, listen, this guy's an asshole.
Yeah, I don't know, because Luther still does it because he gets arrested in the next scene, you know? And one thing I do like is when Superman lands and Lois is like, oh, would you believe the day I fucking had, and gets stranded out here in the desert and all this shit. And then Jimmy Olsen runs up and he's bitching about his fucking shitty day. And, you know, Kal-El is like, man, I just saved both your fucking lives and you don't even know
You guys have no idea what the hell I've done. Like, Jesus Christ, man. Like, give me a thank you.
So he could have literally saved the Waynes, though, if he wanted to reverse time.
Yeah. It definitely opens a whole can of worms.
Like, how far back can you go, right?
I'll mention this in a moment, but there's more to talk about with this scene. But in the final scene, Superman delivers Lex Luthor and Otis, notice not Miss Tessmacher because she helped him, directly to prison and tells the warden, don't thank me. We're all part of the same team. And the theme song kicks off one last time, and he flies off into space for the final credits. And it's not without problems, but this is a very solid ending. And I think really the only drawback is that this was a rewrite. The reversal of the Earth and time was the scripted ending for Superman 2, and they decided during production to use it here, which kind of paints them into a corner when you get to the sequel, because you already fucking have that ending. And a lot of this stuff is being shot concurrently. There's a whole other Pandora's box about the next film that we'll get into later with Richard Donner and then Lester being hired to replace him and all this shit. But like, that's one of the only missteps of this movie, and not in this film of itself, because it works fine here. But it's a little bit of a weird choice to like, all right, well, we know the finale for the next one. Wouldn't it be cooler if we just put that here? I Googled it and it said the original ending was scripted as Superman saves Lois and Jimmy and then rescues Miss Tessmacher because Luthor had enacted some kind of revenge for her betrayal. And so Superman drops off Luthor and Otis in prison. And then we are supposed to see the rocket that he hurled into space blowing up the Phantom Zone.
Yeah.
That's the original ending of the film.
So they were filming 1 and 2 at the same time?
Yes.
Oh, nice.
Okay. Didn't know that.
When we review the sequel, I want to do the Richard Donner cut because that's the scripted film. And it was very much a Zack Snyder, Joss Whedon, or a Tim Burton, Joel Schumacher scenario where this is just a thing that Warner Brothers fucking does. Long before the Batgirl
From the beginning.
controversy, you know, it's just, they've been doing this for decades. So
in the beginning, we always F shit up.
I love that you censored one curse and not the other. That's funny. All right. So any Easter eggs that we didn't talk about here? I guess any connective tissue to other media.
Like the missile and DKR, right?
Yeah, for sure.
His thing going to space all the time and all this stuff. And it's like, part of me wants to start reading like Superman stories because I want to know a little more if we're going to go in this deep.
Yeah. You know, we've done Justice League on this show. We've read Superman, Batman from Jeff Loeb. You know, he's popped up a bit on the podcast, but I was like, man, we've got like the Superman films, the Wonder Woman films. There's so many great DC movies that we haven't talked about that are so iconic. The one Easter egg I wanted to point out is more so a resource for the listeners. There's a great article that I found when I mentioned that there's like side-by-side comparisons, right, of shots in the film against panels from the comics. It's from batmanonline.com. It's batman-online.com. And they have a fucking massive collection of images through the entire film that show the real reverence for the source material, you know, that went into making this film. And so I found that really interesting. But there were so many that I wasn't about to like list them off as we go through this film because it's already got a, you know, pretty substantial runtime. Gramps, what do you have for pros? What did you enjoy most here?
For pros, I love Christopher Reeves. I actually got to see him speak.
Oh, really?
Before his death. Yeah, he came and gave a speech at my university while I was in college.
Cool.
You know, obviously this was post-injury.
Yeah.
It was very sad to see this guy that you had grown up portraying Superman in the condition he was in. But just to see him young, in his prime, in his first major breakout role, capture the goofy side of Clark and wonderful heroic side of Superman in the same, and then like you said, the one scene, the death of Lois scene. I mean, this guy was,
I feel like really overlooked that scene. Like he was phenomenal in that moment.
Yeah. It's interesting that Christopher Reeves, Kevin Conroy, and Robin Williams, they were all roommates together while going to school at Juilliard, New York City.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Insanity.
What a combo.
When you're talking about seeing him in person, I binged the last like 10 George Carlin specials last month. And then I started going through all the Chris Rock ones from the beginning. And, you know, he has this bit.
That's right. You get paralyzed, they don't got shit for you. Look at Christopher Reeve paralyzed. Superman can't walk. What kind of sorry ass shit is that? Superman can't walk. What's next? What the fuck? Aquaman gonna drown in the tub? What the fuck kind of injustice is this? Superman can't walk.
That is such a fucking injustice, you know. I think obviously the similarity to Stephen Hawking of like this brilliant fucking person with the most promising future, and then like, oh, by the way, your brain hates your body though, and you're gonna die young.
It's so crazy how the world actually saw Christopher Reeve as literally Superman.
Oh yeah,
from the time he did this movie all the way up until what did he do? Superman 4 in like 87.
And frankly, until
like
now, you know.
Yes, he is the shining star, and he's obviously set the bar high for that portrayal of that character. So yes, and I always liked Margot Kidder as Lois Lane. For some reason, I thought that this was the same actress that played Marion in Indiana Jones, but it's not. They just look so familiar.
This is insane, but I've never actually seen an Indiana Jones movie.
Oh my gosh, dude.
I know.
We need to do those.
What?
Don't eat the microphone. I got to mix this shit later.
No, I thought she did great as Lois Lane because, you know, she's kind of quirky. She's a really go-getter.
Yeah, I like a Lois that's like got the gumption, you know, she doesn't take shit. When they get
She's very
robbed, you know,
proactive.
she kicks the fucking mugger in the chest,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
I like that shit. You know, she's a tenacious reporter, not just some damsel in distress.
Right. Exactly. She's very proactive and she's gung-ho about it and she's driven. I liked her portrayal a lot better than like, I love me some Terry Hatcher, but I just, that whole version of the characters I didn't really like. I like the comedy aspect of Lex Luthor and his gang, especially Miss
Tessmacher.
Oh.
She's got put in some outfits in this movie, man.
Yeah, those are my pros. I just thought the character portrayals really shined in this movie. I had some cons with some of the plot points, but
we'll get there, Gramps, okay?
Oh, I know.
Dunk, what do you got for pros? What's your favorite stuff here?
Graham's mentioned a lot when it came to the acting. Again, it's a movie from 1978, and to portray Superman the way you did, or Clark Kent, everything just fit what comic books were. It was a little bit of campy, a little bit of adventure, little over exaggeration. Like, dude was like flying through the core of the earth.
Dude, that sequence is so short, and it's one of the coolest things that happens the whole time.
It was like, wait a minute, he's just flowing through it? Like, yo, man, this guy's superhuman.
Can we have an homage to that in the Superman Legacy movie? That would be like, can we get a modern effects version of dude flying through the earth? I would love that.
That would be phenomenal. And it's things like that, like, you know, you watching a movie from 1978.
Wait, when did this come out?
One more time. 8 years before I was born. You know, like modern day, we're like, oh, the CGI, and we're talking about this and blah, blah, blah. And although the technology wasn't there, you did such an amazing job with this film.
I mean, that's why Star Wars is so amazing, because you did this with a bunch of fucking little models. I'm like,
exactly.
How did they make the blaster effects? How did they do all this shit without computers? You know, like I don't know how any of this shit works back.
Yeah,
you know?
I don't even know how it works now. So to watch it, to be this old, and it to like actually be on a decent movie, those are my pros.
Yeah. Well, I have a couple to add here, you know, to piggyback on Gramps, you know, aside from the incredible performance that Christopher Reeve delivered, I think that, you know, the whole cast, all the way from Glenn Ford, Jonathan Kent, to, you know, Gene Hackman, not so much Brando, but Ned Beatty as Otis is really just a scene stealer. I love it. John Williams, of course, we mentioned this earlier, but this is one of the most legendary anthems in cinema. It's just iconic. But I think perhaps the biggest achievement of this film is exactly what they sold it on, and that was "You will believe a man can fly." Like, they humanized an unbelievable character, someone who's steeped in all this mythology and all of these impossible feats, right? And they make you root for that guy and care about him and empathize with his struggle. And I just think that's the biggest accomplishment of this whole thing, is that they turned that fucking comic book hero into a real guy.
To add to what you just said, it's like, we speak about what does the S stand for? And that's exactly what I feel like this movie gave people hope when it was released.
Yeah.
It gave your brother hope that he could fly.
Maybe false hope. Yeah. Fuck.
But it was like
blind hope.
Yeah. It gave a girl hope that she'd get her cat back, although she got slapped. There was like so much hope, right? And it's like, it gave people hope. At the end of the day, like you saw Clark Kent, it gave him hope to know that he had like a purpose in this world and flew through Magna.
Yeah.
And I feel like in 1970, to portray that in this film and the way it did it.
Yeah, it's like, how does anyone top that?
Yeah.
It's like,
if I was born in 1972 and I'm watching this when I'm 6 years old.
Dude, I do regret, I've never seen Christopher Reeve in a theater. And so when I went to see The Flash and they did the sequence of the CGI cameos, you know, I cried. I straight up cried, because that was the first time in my life I've seen Christopher Reeve in the suit on the big screen.
You also didn't take that scene for granted, because it was like, there's history there. Because even like, you know, as Gramps mentioned earlier, when you watched the running scene, it was like he's running like the Flash. And when you listen to the Flash, like, what did the Flash do? He couldn't change his future.
Yeah.
So he brought things back. And it's like, yeah, that's exactly what Flashpoint is. We just watch Flashpoint, but Superman. 1978. One more time.
When?
It's like Mike Jones. Who?
All right. So we've been gushing about this movie, but I'm sure we have a couple little things here. So cons. What do we got, boys?
Well, Batman's not in it.
That is a substantial downside.
What happens to his suit, man? I'm still like wondering.
If this was a Marvel movie, you get the 3-second clip of it fucking blowing in the wind out the window. You know?
I think he's literally got like a mini backpack that goes behind the cape or under the cape.
That's what weighs him down when he lands or something.
It's like the new Darth Vader figure. It's got the fucking like power box for his lightsaber and his chest, all the light up shit. You know, it's hidden under the cape right back there.
I'm not going to trash it being 2024. Like, oh man, the CGI sucked.
I didn't believe that missile was going to space.
I feel like for Lex Luthor, there wasn't really much of a backstory. It was just like, oh, that's the bad guy. And it was like, all right, we're all in agreement here. And that's it.
Yeah, I mean, he is introduced by having his big get-rich scheme, and then he kind of becomes a terrorist.
Yeah, like he just switched it up, man. He went like, all right, cool. That didn't work out. Let me level up.
But we also see him commit a murder before we even see his face.
I'm just comparing to like modern day things where like we're so used to like having origin stories behind like certain characters.
Right. In this movie, you know, we have Clark's origin story, we have Jor-El's origin story, we have Cal's origin story. Like there's so many fucking origins.
I guess that's the worst I have. Again, I can't compare it to like modern day stuff. It's just wouldn't be fair.
I mean, it's the blueprint for all of them, you know.
Yeah.
So, Gramps, what do you got?
Man, you guys are gonna hate me.
I already do.
And that's why we're going to Dallas, because we all hate each other.
Yeah, we're going to Dallas so that we can get Gramps a commission of Captain Gravity. That's what he needs. We need a kid with a broken leg next to a skyscraper.
That would be the best cosplay ever.
It would be like one of those caution signs that'll have like, there's a guy getting shocked or there's a baby in a tub or whatever. You could have a dude done in that style or a silhouette style, right? It's just like a face hitting the ground. And you got like the flat ground and then the impact lines.
The impact lines.
Yeah. And then just a dude fucking badly landing.
He's like,
hitting
he's
the
the
ground.
reason why there's disclaimers about like things you shouldn't do.
You put on
G made out of crutches.
Hey, before
like
you
the Jackass logo.
Before you watch Superman, hey guys, you can't fly. Okay,
Superman flies.
Yeah.
You can't fly.
Yeah, I'm sure there were thousands of kids who did that same fucking thing.
Oh, 100%.
Maybe, but not off of a 20-foot TV antenna.
Off the antenna, let's go. He was like, bump it up, bump it up. That sucked.
Yeah, I mean, I love the whole world building. We actually get to see Krypton. I love that scene. I wish we had gotten to see a little bit more of the upbringing with the Kents and how they installed his values and core.
Yeah.
But I know that they had to move quick. But I wish we got to see a little bit more of Jonathan Kent and Martha Kent's interaction with him.
Yeah, that was really short-lived, but it's also like a 2-hour and 24-minute movie.
Yeah. Yeah, the third act for me was kind of a little bit of a jumbled mess. I knew that they had to kind of get some big action scenes going and get to him doing his big heroic save, but it was just weird how we see, like you said, Luthor did the whole James Bond villain part where he gets the hero, the protagonist in this impossible situation and reveals his plans. I hate when they do that, but it's in like every
comic book.
It's just such a trope.
Well, and I'm sure it wasn't played out back then either, you know?
Yeah, you're right. But immediately we switched to California. I was just like, how did they get from New to there? Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, there's like a quick mention that Perry says like, oh yeah, they flew out to whatever, you know, and so, yeah, there's definitely a couple of hard cuts.
Yeah, I wish they'd kind of developed that a little bit better, but, you know, maybe that was something that hit the cutting room floor.
That's a Spider-Man thing too, where like every person who's in the most danger personally knows Peter Parker. Every villain personally knows Peter Parker. You know, like it's got to have that personal connection so that the stakes are really, really high, you know, like
and they got to be as far away as possible so that it's impossible to get there.
Yeah, and like if he just saved some other people on the California coast, then where are our other main characters for the resolution? Oh, well, they're back in Metropolis. So, it's like, I get why they do it, but.
Yeah. Neither here nor there. The movie's a classic, so.
Yeah.
Well, I have just a couple cons. I mentioned Lois's monologue. To me, that's the most egregious. Brando is iconic in this role. I just feel the lack of, investment here. I will give him the credit that he is the reason the film got made. This is for its time pretty much unheard of to try to do something like this. And they were having trouble getting the financing for it. And once Brando signed on, because, it was Mario Puzo, the writer of The Godfather. And so once he was able to get Brando, then all of a sudden, oh, okay, well, you can do whatever you want if you got Marlon Brando, So credit him where it's due for getting this movie made. But the other thing structurally is the linear timeline, because everything happens in chronological order. And one thing that, as we later on get to Man of Steel, I feel like they use this film as the blueprint, but they did a much better job of enriching his younger years, because we cut basically from Krypton to him being older, and then we're getting flashbacks, periodic flashbacks that give you character development without just like, okay, and now we're sitting through another era of his origin, and now we're sitting through a third era of his origin. You could get more out of the pacing of the film if you were to cut back and forth in a way like that.
I don't disagree.
Yeah.
But it was 1978.
Well, Puzo did it himself on Godfather Part 2, because young Vito Corleone, right? And then we're having the story of Michael. And so this same writer had already done that. I still think it's a valid criticism of like, well, yeah, this is also the same guy who proved how effective that can be as a technique,
Could be.
Could be. Maybe that's a useful tool for different audiences. This was a comic book character, and they knew that their audience were going to be children.
Yeah.
Children need to see everything.
Yeah, in order.
Spelled out everything for them. Yeah. I say this because I watched this myself when it wasn't out that long, but I would never be able to put the pieces together if it was flipping back and forth in a timeline where it was going from the present to the past, present to the past.
I mean, this was first of its kind, and of its time, I think was an easy 5 out of 5 perfect film. Now that we've talked about everything, how do we feel about it today? What's your guys' rating?
Go, Dunk.
Gee, I have to go first? Oh, man,
you have to go first.
No, fuck that. Gramps, you go first this time.
No, you go first.
I'll kick it off. I think it's a 4.5 out of 5. I think this is a nearly perfect film even to this day. Again, I have just a couple tiny little things, I think any film is going to have, but this is about as close to a perfect film as you could have. It really just kicked off this whole thing that we know and love. I do credit Burton's Batman with really starting this whole generation that we're in now. Without that being the massive smash that it was, we wouldn't have gotten X-Men and Spider-Man, which pushed us into, the new millennium of superhero films. But Batman wouldn't have existed without this, 100%. Like I said, they made us believe, and that's the craziest thing. So, 4.5 out of 5.
That's solid.
Yes, it's a classic movie. It's a must-see, and I'm sure it's already ingrained in everyone's mind. And Christopher Reeve has always been such an icon.
Score.
It's like,
I have to give it a 3.5.
Okay.
That's solid.
That's solid.
Yeah.
And that means that I will rewatch it. And that will mean that I will own the DVD or Blu-ray, because I have to give it a 3.5 because I can't put it at the top when I like the sequel better.
Right.
Oh, there we go. Perfect.
As I pulled this up on my phone, I was like, oh, I only gave this an 8 last time? Fuck that, it's a 9. I actually enjoyed it more because I'm really paying attention and taking it all in. And
no, 100%. And Gramps, I'm kind of on your same boat. I'm not going to say 3.5. I'm going to go 4.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I haven't watched any of the Superman movies since I watched them as a kid before I was 10.
Oh, really? That's
Yeah,
awesome.
I haven't rewatched them.
So we're reliving this shit for you.
Yeah, there's just some scenes that are embedded in my mind, not just naked kid.
I mean, that's your favorite part, but there's
No,
other
not
parts
even
you
close.
remember.
No, don't put that in the internet. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't like
This will be
naked
the
kids.
only clip I use to promote the show.
Yeah.
Oh man, I might end up on an island. The other clip I always think of is like Frozen Lake. So when we get there, we'll talk about that. But I remember like just thinking about certain things, and I was like, oh man, there's certain scenes as a kid that I still think about that I didn't see yet. So I'm gonna give it a 4.
Sure.
This movie is spectacular. Again, being at what year again, ladies and gentlemen? 1978.
78.
It's such a solid film. Everything's phenomenal. I love it. But I just know there's some scenes in the future that we're going to watch and discuss that I'm going to give a higher grading to.
All right, that is our show. Thank you guys so much for listening, and I will see you guys in theaters September 21st for Superman, the Christopher Reeve story. Really excited for that. Already got my ticket. As always, you can give us the fucking likety-like and the subscribe-ity subscribe and the 5 stars and all the shit. And yeah, you know how that goes. Our next episode, we will be doing another Comic-Con review, a video episode with my haul from Rose City Comic-Con in Portland, Oregon. That's where I'm headed next week. So I'm hoping we'll be able to do a breakdown for you. And then we've already recorded more episodes. So our next comic review will be Sam Hamm and Joe Quinones' Batman 89. All right? So stay tuned for more season 4.